Hello and welcome to the Ignoramus Polymath. Today it's episode 8 and we talk about price elasticity of demand. So let's get into the definition, right? Price elasticity of demand. It basically means the responsiveness of demand to a change in price. But we just have to understand what that means, right? So if you remember the law of demand we talked about, that means that if price falls, the quantity demanded increases, and if price rises, the quantity demanded falls. We already know that. Price elasticity, then what's that about? What we talk about here is how much it rises and how much it falls. Basically, if you remember pulling on a rubber band or something, right? So you apply pressure, right? You pull it, and then according to how much you pull, or according to what kind of material, what kind of elastic material you're pulling is, it stretches, right? That's exactly what happens here. Instead of like pulling with your hand, you're using price. Do you get it? Because you use price, and price basically results in changing, and or as it happens in rubber bands stretching, it changes the quantity demanded, and that happens according to what kind of a good it is. So I think you get that idea, right? So there are basically two ways, like two things a good can be. It can either be elastic or it can be inelastic. So what kind of examples do you think an elastic good would be? It's more or less every good that you find, unless it's like produced by a monopoly good, or it basically everything that you use on a regular basis is kind of an elastic good. See, what is an elastic good and what happens to it, right? It means that when price increases, its demand falls, but it has a particular meaning, and that's where the definition comes in, right? The definition is change in price results in a greater change in quantity demanded. So that means that if you reduce your price by $2, that means if you were selling, and you were selling probably like, and the demand was probably 50,000 units, now you'd be selling 50,002 units. No, that's probably not it. That's actually not it. We talk about it through in terms of like percentages. So think of it like this: if you reduce your price from 5 to 3, right? So that's like a 2 reduction. Maybe it's in dollars. Let's say it's in dollars. So $5 to $3, and so that's like a reduction of $2. That's probably like a 40% reduction, because we deal with percentages. Because you can't just be like, okay, so I reduce like $2, so that means 2 more people will buy it, or the demand will increase by 2. You talk about this in terms of like percentages, because that's way more easier to calculate, because otherwise it'd be like, okay, so if I reduce like 0.023 dollars, that means one more person will buy it. I don't think it works in that way, and that's probably not how you do economics anyways. So percentages, and that's we come to the formula a little later, but you basically get an idea of what a price elastic good is, right? So these goods are elastic. It means if the price increases, the demand falls, but the demand falls more than the price increases, because it's an elastic good. These are goods that you buy, but if the price increases, you probably wouldn't buy them, or maybe goods that you would buy if the price decrease a little, but you so yeah, if the price decreases, everyone starts buying it, like a whole lot of people start buying it, and if the price rises, a whole lot of people stop buying it. So that's kind of what an elastic good is. On the other hand, a product can also be inelastic. So what's the definition of inelastic price, right? So that is, change in price results in a proportionately smaller change in quantity demanded. That basically means that no matter, it's more like this, right? However much you increase your price or decrease your price, it's a good whose demand is not going to change that much, at least not as much as you change the price in terms of percentages. So if I increase the price from 5 to 7, $5 to $7, and if I was selling like 50,000 units of something, the quantity demanded wouldn't decrease that much, because it's something that people buy on a regular basis. So it just has an elastic, and it has an inelastic characteristic to it. That means you just can't not run without it. Like for example, electricity. That's an inelastic good, right? Because if the price of electricity increases, you probably wouldn't go like, okay, so I'll just not use the computer for this entire month, or for this entire year, or until the price goes down. You probably wouldn't do that. And yes, so that's why you spend however much they ask you. You use that much of electricity and you pay for it. That's basically saying it's inelastic, because no matter how much the price rises or falls, you use the same amount of electricity. And on the other hand, price elastic means that you probably would get something else, or maybe a substitute, or maybe just run without it. If you, like for example, I don't really need a high spec computer, right? So if a high spec computer costs a lot, for the time being I probably wouldn't get it. I'll probably wait until it like comes to like a normal price. But on the other hand, if the price of a high spec computer just got down, a lot of people would go and buy it, because everyone wants the high spec computer. They just don't want to pay much for it, so they'd have it when the price is low. That means if the price reduces, a whole lot of people would start buying it. That's what price elastic means. So yeah, talk about the formula, right? But I want to give you an idea first, right? So I think the formula should show up on the screen, I think. But it's basically saying that, look, you measure things through the percentages, because I already mentioned to you that before, that you don't want to like measure things by the actual values, like $2 is low, so two more people are buying it, or like the quantity demanded increases by two. That's not how it works. So that's, yeah, so in that sense, you need something that is able to unify both of them in. So yeah, a percentage seems like the best fit, right? So then in that sense, if you think about it, so at the top you have your quantity demanded, and at the bottom you have your price. And in both cases you have the percentage change. But why is it a percentage change, right? So, or how do we calculate the elasticity? We do this by dividing it. But what does this mean? It basically means that if it is an elastic good, so what happens when you you know maths, but what happens when you divide a larger number by a smaller number? You get a number that is greater than 1. And if you divide a number that is smaller by a larger number, you get something that's a small, like less than 1. So if you get that, you get this, right? Consider an elastic good. An elastic good would mean that however much the price changes in terms of percentages, the quantity demanded increases more in terms of percentages. That means the percentage of change in quantity demanded will be greater than the change in price. That means you get a value that is greater than 1. What happens on the other end? What happens when it's an elastic good? If it's an elastic good, your price change in price, percentage of change in price would probably be something like whatever it is. But your quantity demanded percentage change would not be as high. It would not be as high because it's an inelastic good. The change is not that much. So in that case, you're dividing a smaller number by a larger number, and you get something that's less than 1. And that's why. Oh, and another thing, you might be asking, because the actual equation shows that you always get a negative number. Now you might ask, why is it negative? Because it's negative because there is a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. You already know that from the law of supply or law of demand. You know that if price reduces, quantity demanded increases. So there is a negative relationship. You cannot just show it by giving a positive number. You can just say if price increases, then it's a positive elasticity. That would imply that as price rises, quantity demanded rises, and as price falls, quantity demanded falls. That's not true. It's the opposite. So that's why we always use a negative value. But when you're interpreting the values, it's always good to use the absolute value and not like the negative, because in most cases, actually in all cases, because that would break the law. In all cases, if the price rises, quantity falls, and if price falls, quantity rises. So there is always a negative relationship between price and quantity, right? So it's always negative. So it's better you get the value in negative, but you use and interpret the value in terms of its positive value or its absolute value. So yeah, we're done with the definition: price elasticity, price elastic goods, price inelastic goods, and the formula itself. Let's come over to like the interpretation of things, right? So we already talked about elastic and inelastic goods. That's done. Like that's out of there. Some examples of elastic goods would be like regular goods with substitutes. We already know that. Inelastic goods are something things like you just can't you just can't not have them. Like food, essential. They're very essential. Food, you have to eat to survive. So you cannot just not buy food because it's expensive. Or probably something like salt, because you need salt. Even if it's expensive, you need to salt to like add to your food and whatnot. So yeah, salt is also an inelastic good. Medicine, because if a doctor prescribes a medicine to you, you probably need to get it, right? You cannot just be like, okay, it's expensive, so I'll just not buy it. That's not the way it works. And another thing, monopoly goods. They're goods produced by a monopoly, and that means that there is only one farm that's producing that particular good. That means that there is no other good that there is no other farm that's supplying this particular good, so you have to get it from them. And if it's an essential good or not essential, if you're buying it, it probably means that you need it, right? And that means the farm has total control over the price that they set for that particular good. If they charge high and you still need it, you need to pay the high price. If they charge low, you need to, that's good for you. Yeah. So but there is like three more examples. They're not exactly like always happening, but these are more like theoretical ideas that cover the spectrum of elasticity, because we talked about elastic, we also talked about inelastic, but there is something in middle called unitary elastic. It's where the price elasticity of demand, the elasticity value, the formula gives out exactly one. Now you probably wouldn't be getting exactly one in like realistic cases, but it's good to have an idea of like what exactly it means. When so basically it says that in unitary elastic, um the percentage change in price and the percentage change in quantity demanded are the same. That means if I'm selling 50,000, if the quantity demanded for a particular product is 50,000 and I'm selling it for $5, and if I reduce the price by by $2, as I was saying, so now it's $3, that's a 40% reduction, means there will be a 40% increase in the quantity demanded. So I think that's like 40% of 50, that's probably like 70,000. I think I'm not really good at math, so yeah, you guys can look into it, but I think it's 70,000. So that's kind of what unitary elastic means. And I will move on to like another characteristic of a unitary elastic in terms of like revenues, total revenue, but I'll get to that later. There's another one, which is price elasticity of demand is zero. It's called perfectly inelastic good. It's a perfectly inelastic good. We talked about inelastic goods, and what exactly does inelastic mean? Inelastic means that it's basically you cannot not have it, right? You need it. And perfectly inelastic good is basically a good that's like you need it so much that no matter what price they're asking for, the quantity demanded is always the same. There is no particular instance where the quantity demanded is not going to be equal to that, like not like quantity demanded is going to be less or higher. It's always that particular amount. It's also like pretty theoretical, but some examples like include things like essential foods. Like I'm not talking about like a five-star hotel food. Like I'm saying getting rice and bread on your table, like that kind of essential food. Like those are food that you need on a regular basis. So they're perfectly inelastic. At least they're more like they're close to perfectly inelastic. And then things like medicine and also habit forming goods like cigarettes and tobacco products and other sorts of harmful things that harm your body as well, that you get used to on a regular basis. But yeah, those things as well. In those cases it's zero, because the change in quantity demanded is zero. It's like this, right? When you divide zero by anything, you get zero, because yeah, it's like I think you've always all heard of the Cookie Monster explanation of zero, but it's basically saying that if you divide zero by anything, you always get zero. So perfectly inelastic means it's zero. No matter what the price is, no matter what changes happen in the price, the quantity demanded is always going to be the same. Now, on the other hand, we have something called perfectly elastic, and that is, well, if you look at the exact definition of it, it says that demand where PED equals to zero, an increase in price will result in zero demand It's actually saying that, look, this means that a product is only being bought at a particular price. If you go up or down from that particular price, the quantity demanded becomes zero. It's like absolutely zero. Like nobody buys it except for that particular price. Now I looked for some examples, didn't really find that much because everyone is like, oh, it's not, like, it doesn't happen, but there are things that are close to elastic, and that's like the regular goods and whatnot. But one thing I found interesting, I found this on Quora. Someone called Christina something said this. I just want to say this because I found this interesting. She talked about this particular example, which is in terms of like currency or money. See, you wouldn't buy a dollar for anything more than a dollar, or you wouldn't buy any like currency for more than that currency. If you had to buy a dollar, you would buy it at $1. Even if it was like $1.01, you still wouldn't buy it. You will buy $1 for exactly another dollar. That's like, I mean, it's just an example. It's like so you get the idea that what exactly is the real life version of like a perfectly elastic good, right? So done with all that, we move on to the factors. There are primarily four factors. Number one, availability of substitutes. Number two, degree of necessity. Number three, proportion of income. And number four, time. Now I'll just explain them one by one. Availability of substitute means that if there are more substitutes available, it means that if I have a phone right here, Moto G6, now if there was another brand of phone, maybe this phone got a little expensive, maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe it's more expensive now than like its original price. So I'd be like, okay, but I probably wouldn't buy this phone anymore because it's expensive. I'd buy another one that's probably like this phone, probably a Samsung phone or a Huawei phone or an LG phone or whatever. But I'd get another phone probably, because this phone's prices increase because there's a lot of substitutes available. There is a lot of substitutes. So yeah, in those cases, the particular elasticity of these goods are very elastic, because if the price increases even by a little, everyone is going to stop buying your phone and probably go and get some other phone. And if like, on the other hand, if you reduce your price by just a little bit, um, everyone would go and buy your phone instead of buying others' phones. So in those cases, availability substitutes mean that it can be, so instead, in this case, if you have more substitutes, it's elastic. If it's less substitutes, it's inelastic, because you don't have anywhere else to go, you don't have anything else to buy, you have to buy this. So it doesn't really matter if the price is high or low, you have to get it. But yeah, not in terms of phones. So yeah, thank God for that. Second, degree of necessity. It's how much you actually need it. Like for example, a car, like, maybe, so you don't really need a car because you can always get public transport or whatever. But it depends on your necessity. Like, if you do you really need a car? No. That means it's an elastic good. If the price is low, like, sure, I'd get a car because it's cheaper than before. But if the price is higher and you don't really need it, you probably wouldn't buy it at all, because yeah, I mean, I don't really need a car. I can probably just get public transport. So in those cases, the necessity is not that high. So you can always just get something else. And that's why it's elastic. That means if the price is higher, a lot of people would not buy it, and if the price is lower, a lot of people would jump in to buy this. That means it's very elastic. On the other hand, if you have like things that are very essential, like consider like what we talked about before, like essential food like rice and bread, or like, or other things like medicine, in those cases it's very necessary. When it's like, when you need medicine, you need medicine. You can, there is no alternative to it unless you believe in stuff like homeopathy and whatnot. But like, you need these things. These are essential things. So in those cases, you probably wouldn't compromise to like, okay, it's better if I just not have like a day's meal because it's expensive. Like, you wouldn't do that. In most cases, you'd still buy it. That means that these goods are essential, and if it is essential, it's inelastic because you need it. Like, you cannot just not get it. So even if the price rises, it's still inelastic. If the price, like, gets lower, that's good for you, right? You get to buy like more food or more medicine. I don't know why what you do with more medicine, but yeah, you can get it. And then number three, proportion of your income. Proportion of your income means how much of your income you actually spend on something. Maybe you're buying, well, the example that I got in the book is maybe you're buying a TV, right? So when you're buying a TV, it's like a significant portion of your salary or your wage or your income, right? So maybe consider that you're buying like basically, let's imagine you earn 100 a month. I don't know what currency, what unit, but you earn something 100 a month. And the TV costs like 50, so that's like 50% of your income just right out there, like just for getting the TV, which costs 50. So that's 50% of your entire income of the month. So you probably wouldn't want to spend that much anyways, but then you still want to get a TV. So in those cases, if the if the price of your like if the price of the TV is higher, which means like if there is a particular good whose price is higher, it's more elastic because the proportion of your income is higher, like the amount of you're spending on that particular good is higher. That means it's elastic because the higher it is, the less you'd want to spend it. You're willing to wait it out, like let's wait for like a 2-3 months or maybe a year, see if the price falls and then I'll get it, or maybe wait for a discount. But if the price rises, and then you probably wouldn't get it at all because a lot of people wouldn't buy it. But if it is lower, a lot of people would rush in to buy it because they were waiting to spend that part of like their income, a large chunk of the income on this particular TV. So if the price of the TV falls down, even by a little, a lot of people would jump in to buy it because they want it. They just didn't want to spend that much of the portion. So if, as it gets lower, it becomes more elastic, and I mean, as it gets lower, more people buy it, and as it gets higher, less people buy it. So that's elastic. On the other hand, if the whatever good you're buying has a very small proportion of your income, like maybe you earn 100 and then you just want to get a pencil or something, or a pen, and a pen costs like 0.01 in terms of whatever currency we're talking about, and you're earning 100, that's like very less for like what you earn on a monthly basis. So sure, just get it. Like you can get it if you want, and you will get it. So yeah, in those cases, even if the price rises or the price falls, it's pretty much like a very small proportion. So in those cases, it's very inelastic because it doesn't matter if the price is high or low, as it's a small proportion of your income, you can still get it. The fourth one is time. Consider this. You wake up in the morning and you realize you don't have toothpaste. So you need to go get toothpaste. Now there is a particular brand, toothpaste X. So you go to the store because now you really need a toothpaste. So you go to the store and you get yourself a toothpaste X. But when you're getting it and you're at the counter, you see that the price of toothpaste X has gone from maybe 2 to 4. That's like a 50% increase, I think. Yeah, or maybe not. That's like 100% increase. Yeah, that's 100% increase. But still, it goes from 2 to 4, and that's like a lot. And but now you really need a toothpaste, so you still get toothpaste X because in the short term you don't have any knowledge of any other toothpaste brands out there or what their price is. So you just rather get it because you don't know what are the alternatives. But imagine this in the long term, right? Consider this. You get to know it right now, and then now you know that toothpaste X is like expensive, it has gotten expensive, the price is higher. So now you look up and you see that okay, there is another toothpaste Y that has a lower price, like it's maybe like 1, or like toothpaste Z, which is like lower as well. So in those cases, now you're willing to buy that particular toothpaste, whichever you're trying to buy, and which is cheaper because now it's in the long term. As long, because that's why we say that in the short term, since you don't have any knowledge and you don't have any other idea of the substitutes and the other things that are available, you probably just get whatever there is. And in those cases, it's inelastic because people will still buy a product because they just don't know where else to get it. But in the long term, they have a better idea and they know what are the substitutes. So in those cases, they'd rather buy something else. So in those cases, if the price increases or the price decreases, it's gonna be more elastic because now people know what are the other choices and they'll go get those. So now that we're done with the factors, we just need to talk about the total revenues in terms of like these situations. Consider this. You're selling an inelastic good, maybe electricity, like maybe you're an electricity supplier. So people are gonna use electricity regardless of what like you ask them for, right? I mean, you could probably ask for five from them. I mean, I'm still talking about this hypothetical currency that I'm just made up in this episode, but yeah, consider that you could ask for five, you could ask for 10, you could ask for 20. That's a little too much, but still, realistically speaking, you can charge them and people will still use it. Nobody's just gonna be like, no, I'm not gonna use electricity anymore. I'll just live the nomad's life. I'll live the caveman life. Nobody's gonna do that. They're still gonna pay for electricity. So in those cases, see, and the use of electricity is very limited. It's inelastic because nobody's going to use more if the price is less, and nobody's going to use less if the price is more. So the quantity demanded is always constant. That means that in these cases, if you raise the price rises and the quantity doesn't fall. The quantity usually remains more or less pretty much close like to the original price. So in these cases, revenue increases because you're getting more at that particular, like for each unit of electricity you sell. So your revenue increases. On the other hand, if you reduce your price, people are still going to use the same amount of electricity. So in those cases, the revenue is still going to be like revenue is going to be like it's going to fall because the quantity demanded is still the same, because you can just expect that people will use more. So if you reduce the price, you're just going to have like less revenue. On the other hand, consider elastic goods, right? So elastic goods have a little different of a characteristic. Consider this: you have an elastic good, you're selling it for 5, you're selling 50,000 units for 5, whatever currency you're using, right? And then you decide that, okay, I'm gonna increase my price by 20%. So I think that's 70, and then your quantity demanded also falls by 40 40%, which is I think that's 30,000. Yeah, you're selling 30,000 quantity. That means quantity fell. Oh, sorry. I mean, it's an elastic good, so it has to be more than number one. So yeah, maybe it decreases by 50%. So that's 25,000 units, right? So in these cases, the change in quantity demanded is always greater than the change in price. Meaning that if you change your price, if you decrease your price by just a little, the quantity demanded will significantly rise. That means if your price falls, your revenue will increase, because see, the you're multiplying, because if you know how you get total revenue, which is by multiplying the price and by the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. You see that as the price decreases, like the price and the quantity are multiplied together. So if you reduce your price by like 2% and your quantity demanded increases by 5%, that means that even if you reduce your price, you still get a higher revenue. On the other hand, if you increase your price by just a little, the quantity demanded will fall just as much as it rose in that, like in the previous case, right? In those cases, if your price rises, your quantity demanded falls and revenue falls too. So if you have an inelastic good, which is like we talked about electricity, in those cases, if you raise your price, you raise your revenue. If you reduce your price, you reduce your revenue. But on the other hand, if you have an elastic good, if you raise your price, your revenue falls. If you decrease your price, your revenue rises. And then you have unitary elastic good, which I mentioned I'll be talking about, which is basically saying that the revenue remains same all the time, because the percentage increase and the percentage decrease is always the same. If price falls by 40%, quantity demanded rises by 40%. If price rises by 20%, quantity falls by 20% as well. So in both cases, it's the same. PED equals to 1, and your elasticity is always 1. And in all cases, your revenue is the same, because your price falls just as much as your quantity demanded rises. Remember, in terms of percentage, because if it was any other metric for like comparing the two, you'd be confused, because yeah, $2 fall and then 2 people extra buy it. That doesn't really make sense. So percentages, but when you measure them in terms of like percentages, you'll realize that the total revenue always remains the same. even though it's not like it doesn't happen in realistic terms anyways, because unitary elastic isn't realistic anyways. Actually, like it might be, but there is no particular good that's like, okay, so for this good it's unitary elastic. So yeah, I think that's it. It was a pretty long episode, but I hope you stuck back and you listen to this entire thing to get like an idea of how elasticity of demand works. Next episode we talk about elasticity of supply, price elasticity of supply. So I think that's it. Thank you very much, guys, and I wish you all the best in your journey of gathering knowledge. Thank you.